Welcome, 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 welcome to another episode of Where Angels Fear to Tread. I'm your host, April, and we're coming to you live from the University of Winnipeg in Winnipeg. And today's guest is a special guest, actually. The reason I say he's special, the reason I say that he's a special guest is because we don't talk that often, but I've followed his work for years, and James Horak has some very unusual takes on human life on the planet, what the planet history is all about. So I would invite you to suspend your disbelief for a while. These ideas will set in after a while. When you think about them, I'm actually on a site. I believe this is the EMV's infoblogspot.com, where it's quoted, "Man's off-planet origins and refined cosmology to free humanity from control and tyranny from a man that claims not to be from here," meaning James. Let's explore the 300,000 plus years of mankind's life on planet Earth. Are there extraterrestrials out there waiting to help? Do sentient beings the size of continents orbit the sun to save life in the solar system from certain doom due to solar flares? Are electromagnetic vehicles extracting surplus energy from our sun? And are ET civilizations helping us prevent total annihilation of our species and the Earth? And that's a quote from Freeman. Thank you, Freeman. I did listen to the interview. Are you there, James?
Yes, I am, April.
I'm sorry for the long introduction, but I caught part of the interview that you did with Freeman, and what I'm noticing is there's kind of a prescient need to get information out, more so now than there has been in a while. Do you have that feeling yourself?
In a way, I know a lot of people are fed up with the gurus they've associated with over the past. I don't blame them. I have a friend that followed a gentleman who was astute, and I think his view of life and philosophy was remarkable. Nothing phony about him at all, but he was murdered. He had quite a following, and he was a threat to the establishment, and so they incarcerated him in jail long enough to poison him.
Right.
And when he came out, he lived long.
And you look at the perfect example. I think the epitome of it, probably the best example, is Julian Assange, and the willingness to just overstep lawfulness as well as legality, and just remove him for basically what are political ends.
I think Julian Assange made a great effort not to ever cross the law. He was fed information from hackers that may have, but then again, when you appreciate freedom of speech, he did nothing wrong.
But the assault I'm talking about is on the part of the authorities that went in there and just obliterated freedom of speech and all due process.
Well, they've been doing that for some time. The methods that they've used have been subtle up until President Trump was elected.
Right.
Then their desperation set in, but they'd always been removing books, a lot of things falling through the cracks intentionally. Articles, TV shows are gone.
There's always been CIA people perusing libraries, and there's always been covert censorship, yeah?
Well, they call them readers, and what they do is everything that's published, when it is presented to the Library of Congress so that it can get its ISBN number, they read it. That's what their job is, and if they find anything that touches on what the CIA considers sensitive, then they find a way to make sure it isn't promoted. My book, when I wrote it, was published abroad, and it was open. It had an ISBN number, so it was available overseas. But it was presented on Amazon.com, but not available. And then Amazon.com UK presented it, and then made it available to anyone in Europe and elsewhere except the United States. They wouldn't sell it to an American. So that told me it was banned, and until it's only been until President Trump came in that it's been available at all here. And, it wasn't promoted even in Europe. So I have given away e-book copies of it, and anyone that requests it, because, if they don't promote it, they don't promote it. And, of course, if it isn't, people think that it's dead in the water, that it's not worth reading or whatever. But I guarantee you, it's like nothing else you'll ever read or have read.
Yes, and I guess what really comes to mind is the questions, is this fear, like censorship, is this fear of going outside the mainstream narrative and losing power that way, or is it fear of waking up to these dark agendas and just like losing power?
Well, I name names, I give instances, I give proof, I give everything out there. What would get a lot of people killed.
Right.
And I have spoken about this on shows before, a number of things. And some of the things I held my tongue for a while that were classified, things that happened that I was involved in, but I've never taken a security oath.
Right.
So I'm free. I mean, I've had attacks on me, but they haven't been the usual kind, let me say.
But you don't want to go around talking about the Clinton body count when there's a sudden rise in them.
Oh, I will. If I have the details, I'll give them. I can tell you where all the heroin is coming into this country, where most of it is distributed. And I've talked about this before, and this is right here in Fort Worth.
Right, right. I wonder if we could go back to the days when you first were prospecting, and I wanted to talk about this mineral. And I think what some people are calling ingredients of shungite or something like that now. I'm not sure what it's called. But could you take the listener back to set the scene for us? Like you're prospecting and like you're traveling around. Are you in a vehicle and you're going to a site, or you know about a site? How did it come about that you discovered that mineral? Or
I learned about my connection with the EMVs a long time ago when I was prospecting in Utah. And one of the things that I never talk about anything I can't point to, something that has recently emerged from the depths of secrecy. And it'll give me a frame of reference to share with people, because if I come out with a lot of the things I could talk about, the incredulity that is native to this earth would not permit people to even consider the prospect I could be talking about something true.
Right, right.
So I waited until an implant was found in Napoleon's skull to talk about what happened to him to change history.
Clipper 4 chip or whatever that was?
It was a chip, and it's interesting that the chip, a microchip, affected his behavior, and I can tell you what it was. At the time that I was talking about it, it hadn't even been invented.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's Generation 4 Clipper chip.
Right, and the thing about that comes to mind automatically, unavoidably, is time travel.
Time travel is interesting, and people can't conceive of it here because I made a statement a long time ago, about 20 years ago, and I was talking about a couple of men that were visiting me, and they wanted to know how I knew Dr. Berggren and a number of other things, and so time travel that came up. And they said, how can you be so certain that that's a prospect, that that's possible? And I said, look, are you going to state out and out that time travel is impossible, like some people have? And they said, no, we won't. I said, well, then consider this. If there ever was time travel, if there ever will be time travel, if there is time travel, it's here now.
Yeah.
And they thought about that and thought about that and thought about that. They sat there 15 minutes thinking about that. And one of them, the brighter of the two, piped up, Yeah, that's right. I said, you've got it above 125 IQ, don't you?
Yeah, because you only have to start flipping around time, and then you can go back before the thing was invented and invent it there.
That's right. That's right. You back and forth, and there's other aspects to time travel that would allow you to learn events precisely without affecting the continuum.
Right.
And that is understandable only when you look at time cyclically and build a model of it like a spring so that you can compress it and you can choose the point which you want to go in, but you're struck to that point where you're not interfering with the continuum.
That makes sense.
You can see what's going on at that point. Yeah, that is only possible due to the fact that there have been extinctions here, and in at least 5 of those extinctions, there were errant attempts at time travel. And it created flaws in the continuum, or in what I call, it creates ripple effects that are like folds in time, and they allow you this model of time as a spring.
Right.
And of course, there are people in various studies, usually the occult, arcane knowledge, whatever, that have stipulated that perspective is not conditioned to one view, that the observer can be placed different places. John Donne wrote a book on it, and I don't mean the poet. I mean a gentleman who was the first to bring up the prospect of any unified field theory. And he did it and built a beautiful metaphysical model. I'd like to discuss what I define as metaphysical, because a lot of people think that it's woo-woo, a lot of people think that it's one thing or another, but simplistically, it's very conceivable. Mm-hmm. My definition of metaphysics is that for every principle, every concept that we have that we accept as almost law, physical law, there are anomalies that contradict it. And most of the scientists don't want to discuss anomalies. They want to put it on a shelf, label it anomaly, and forget about it. Well, that's not science. What I've always postulated is when you don't have a defined explanation for something, you start erecting one using both 2 facets of consciousness, creativity and imagination. And when you do this, you build models, and they're metaphysical models. They're models that are beyond proof. They're beyond having a high degree of probability attached, but you work on it until it fits all the criteria that resolve the anomaly. And if once you resolve that anomaly, then you have something definite that I apply to the principle of inevitability. It has such a high probability of being true that you could say it's inevitably true.
Right, like with all the mass die-off of birds or something like that, we might be able to...
Look at all these astronomers, astrophysicists, precisely, and theoretic physicists. Look at all of them. They don't ever talk anymore about statistical analysis or probability. Mm-hmm. It's almost taboo.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting because that's, we know what we know now. The rest that we conjecture about artificial intelligence, about a number of things dealing with interdimensional travel, which is false. All of these things we build these theories on, but, they don't go any further than that.
Right.
You got the string theory, you got there is no beginning and no end, you got all of this, and yet it's just there like a marquee of a theater, but you go inside and there's no movie. And that's fine for Carl Sagan. The late Carl Sagan. I'm not going to say anything bad about the dead. But, If I ever hear this billions and billions of worlds and stars and all that again, I'm going to throw up. When he would say that, it's like he wouldn't explain anything. It's like science ignoring anomaly. And, of course, that's what sets Dr. Berggren apart from other scientists, is that he didn't accept anomaly. He went further, and he found details that were incredible.
And, I was really impressed that he went on to actually give lectures on it, too. I caught one of them. Not in person.
Well, he was wonderful, and I dealt with him and with an associate of his. I'm still in touch with her, Casey Dawkins. Very wonderful lady. But she was very loyal and helped Dr. Berggren a great deal because he was elderly at the time. And she helped him, and a very insightful lady, too. What Dr. Berggren did is akin to what Copernicus and Galileo Galilei did, and even more important.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah. And some of what you're doing, too, is along the same lines, too. It's just that it's not as well established and well known. You didn't go for fame and fortune. So,
Well, I have, in the past, I've stated things that eventually came into the stream of content for others. And, of course, they didn't mention that I was the first. But I don't care.
Right.
I'm not looking for notoriety or whatever. I want to put it out there for people to pick up and run with.
Yeah, I'm like that too. I believe that a good idea is no one's. I don't believe in copywriting. Ultimately, in an ideal world, unless someone's going to steal your work and stuff.
Well, they'll do that. I mean, China has become very artful in doing that. Patents, whatever. I mean, if they allow their artists more freedom, we would really see it take off. I mean, they'd probably be doing a Chinese version of Shane. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I'm beside myself now.
Right. So you mentioned the work, and for me as an Aboriginal Two-Spirit person, I have, when I say people, I have hundreds of thousands of people in mind, Aboriginal people in particular, kids struggling through the system, kids under lockup, men in prison, women being murdered, etc., the unfairness in general. But some of our traditions are starting to come back. Some things are starting to flourish again. If our languages come back, then there's hope. But our languages are down to like 5% the last time I looked. So.
A long time ago they called archaeology and anthropology ethnology.
Right.
And it began as study of language, and how language is related to revealing connections between cultures that were removed geologically or geographically.
Right.
But today it's linguistic anthropology, and there are a number of ways of looking at the way that it reflects on a culture. And I had a course in Japanese with a Japanese who threw a light on, he was a linguistic anthropologist, and he threw a light on one of the ways to look at culture is how people in different cultures tell a child to behave. And the way I liked best was the Navajo way. And they say to a child that's misbehaving, that's not the Navajo way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Germans say, get in line.
Right. And I guess I was trying to get us back to some of your earlier prospecting days, and basically, hopefully you could tell maybe a synoptic kind of version of the story of the California wine situation and this mineral.
It relates to a mineral that sold probably the only people that have possession of this mineral is a company in Las Vegas that has contracts to afford it to, Vietnam. Vietnam is recovering their soil from the effects of the dioxin in Agent Orange.
Wow.
And this mineral is superb. It is the reason that California produces the finest wine in the world now.
And what is the name of the mineral?
There is nothing to compare it with. It is mistakenly considered a clay in the montmorillonite group. It's
right.
not.
Okay.
It's not of earth, and it is in piles out on the Nevada desert. And you can take it. I mean, there are several uses for it, but it can save this planet from starvation. And in fact, when I introduced it, the first person I introduced it to was a horticulturalist who was working for the Trilateral Commission down on the King Ranch, where they had a station for experimentation, mostly hydroponics, and they had one of the largest greenhouses I've ever seen.
Right.
And anyway, this gentleman, Mr. Hightower, Robert Hightower, had published, and I read his article where he was concerned about a fertilizer for Brazil, where they grow the manioc that is the source for tapioca. On the slopes of these mountains, the rainy season will wash all that off, and then they'll have to put back the fertilizer, usually bat guana or whatever they have that is rich in nitrogen and has minerals that particular plant needs. And it was getting so expensive that it wasn't cost effective to keep these plantations going. And since tapioca is a staple of Brazil, like potatoes is of Ireland,
okay,
they were concerned, and so I called him up after I'd read his article, and I said, you want something that reacts with the subsoil, that'll hold even during the rainy season, right? And he said, yes. I said, I've got the thing. So he said, can you bring me a sample? And I said, sure. He said, I'll pay all your expenses, giving you a consulting fee. And I said, I don't need any of that. Just bring it down to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down to, this was near on the King Ranch, which is near Padre Island. And so I went down and I got a tour of the place, and he took the sample and he said, I'll get back with you as soon as I've tested this. I told him some of the things it would do, and it would do, and he was excited. So a couple of weeks later, he gives me a call and he says, will you come down? If you come down, I'll pay your expenses, give you a consulting fee. And I said, that's not necessary. I drove down. And he said, I want to talk to you. And we walked out away from all the buildings. And he said, this is incredible. He said, everything you said is true and much more.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I took the results of my tests to my superiors. And they said, you don't control the world with plenty. You control it with famine. He said, I quit him on the spot. I gave him my 3 weeks' notice. And he said, can you help me find this stuff? I said, sure.
Right. Artificial scarcity is the way the economy works.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so the Trilateral Commission is as evil as CFR.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. If you ever doubt that, you might read a book, Tragedy and Hope, by one of the apologists for them.
Is that wherein he discusses Cecil Rhodes' will to create the circles within committees within committees within committees as a strategy?
Oh, yeah. They want to co-opt everything that was ever threatening to them. They want to co-opt it, just like they have the Democrat Party. And, you wonder, is that desperation? No. It's corruption. They are so owned and controlled, and, they have used blackmail, they've used all sorts of things, created the taste for pedophilia, created the taste for cannibalism, created the taste for things that are so abominable that once these people get involved, they're controlled by their own sublimated guilt.
Yeah.
Sublimated, I mean that they don't have guilt like a good person has. They have guilt like, well, I ought to be able to get away with this as long as people knows it goes along and is acceptable socially.
Right.
That's why it's in your face. Because, look, it's just the same way they teach sex education in kindergarten.
I know. It's pathetic. How can this be going on? It's like, where are the parents? Like, why are the parents not saying anything? Why are they not doing anything? This is insane.
A parent that will work on the child to change genders to suit them, like they would have a cat that's colored right to fit into their decor.
Well, the thing is, transgender people have always existed throughout history, but it's been a tiny, 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 tiny minority of people.
It hasn't been manipulated. It hasn't been, that'll...
This is Tavistock. This is Tavistock.
Yeah. Well, it has more to do with Tavistock than most things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The Tavistock Institute is probably, that's the seatbed of eugenics. And, of course, eugenics has no more core. It has nothing, it is the science view of Satanist, of the Golden Dawn or Crowley's Do As Thou Wilt.
It's the origin of asymmetrical warfare.
Well, that doesn't make as much money as actual warfare.
No, it doesn't.
So one feeds the other. And, what central banking was bred out of?
Where it originally came from, was holding people's gold.
Well,
or goods.
What it was originally bred out of is that very primitive people, before you get into monument building cultures and so forth, you get into sub-tribal cultures where, hunting and subsistence agriculture is practiced.
Right.
Before a Bronze Age or before the advent of iron. And these people had an institution called potlatch.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end of the growing season during harvest, all the surplus was hauled into the center square and burned. That's potlatch because they didn't let it fall into the hands of a merchant or anyone that could be substantially wealthier than anyone else.
Monopolizers.
The Spartans took it even further than that. They created a currency, and the currency was about a 40-pound stone that you drill a hole through and put a shaft of wood through and roll to market so that nobody could hoard money.
Right.
Well, this is extreme, but, this is the beginning of central banking. Once that was stopped, when potlatch was stopped and replaced with war, you needed somebody that had the money to create these wars, and, of course, be profitable and create an elite. And that's been the problem here all along. Once you got into elitism, anything became, anything that enhanced somebody's power over others was okay.
And everything becomes a buffer, like the police and the government.
Well, people here on Earth are so fashion conscious that a uniform can change their attitude.
I know.
Even to the negative or change it to the positive. If you're a policeman, you go into Hell's Kitchen, it's a negative attitude. If you go into Chicago slums or whatever, it's a negative attitude. But if you go among people in middle class, it denotes confidence and authority.
Mm-hmm.
But, you have all these aspects which are cultural. They have nothing to do with race. They have nothing to do with anything but education and culture. And education is supposed to create culture. But when you corrupt it with a syllabus and you make it a manufactured thing, synthetic, and no creativity, no reliance on historical fact, just the crap that somebody's bias controls.
Yeah, and it's not even a half-good bedtime story, for crying out loud.
No, I mean, if you look at some of these syllabuses and what they do to teachers that won't strictly stay with them, stick by them, and, the teacher may have a wealth of knowledge, can't apply it to his students. No, he's got to stick by something that somebody made up that's politically correct, that's full of presumed notions of bad science, like that climate change is man-made. It's not. I talk about so many fallacies that are part of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
And one is that you want an interesting fact that I can give you. When I was a kid in 1954 and 55, we had a summer that was interesting, but we had the hottest day of the year, not in the summer, but on Christmas Day. It was 99 degrees.
Wow. That's amazing.
And, we had a flood that was incredible here in Texas. And, I saw houses floating down a river, just all kinds of stuff, divided the town. You had to use a rowboat to get from one side of the town to another.
We have a place like that here, too. We're right in the Red River Valley. So when it floods, we got to get around in canoes and stuff, too. But it's rare, actually.
The thing is here, I'm talking about high ground.
Yeah.
Downtown Fort Worth. It was really interesting. Hit the second floor of the Montgomery Ward's building. I mean, it just doesn't happen, does it? But, this was back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so, you can debunk that crap that AOC and the demon rats want to sell you so easily. But look at all the control and money. Bureaucrats and politicians work so hard to increase the amount of money they can control.
Well, and also the astroturfing that's going on, like the fake activism, the paid-for George Soros activists, and, not to mention the false flags and all this other garbage, right?
Oh, well, it's all a part of it. I mean, it's engineered. They have social engineers at work, and they will stop at nothing. They have no morality.
Well, I think these are essentially the guys. These are the technocracy guys. They're Technocracy Inc. guys, in principle.
Well, they don't really, of course, this is another thing entirely that people are not aware of. And the word is not even, I don't even believe is in Wikipedia or in recent collegiate dictionaries where it should be. It's called psychotronics.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is what the 5G is all about.
Yeah.
Now, at one time, the psychotronic industry was open, and you could go online and see their wares, what they sold, and buy it.
Right.
And they'd tell you what it would do, what the range of it would do if you wanted to make your neighbors fight, you want to give everybody in the neighborhood headaches or whatever, you could buy crap that'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about 12, 13, 14 years ago, it went underground. You know why? Because military intelligence and certain other intelligence agencies saw this as, oh, this is too good to share.
Mm-hmm.
So they took it over. They became the number one customer and then the only customer. And they went underground. 5G is going to be a killer.
Yeah, 5G is just it's not just that it's a killer. It's also a three-dimensional mapper. So there won't be any place you can go where you're invisible.
There is a ruse, and that the Chinese version of it has been outlawed. All of it should be outlawed.
Mm-hmm.
It all can do the same thing. It all has the ability to do the same thing. Now, you may think that I'm making this up.
Yeah.
But
right.
About 25 years ago, I was going to Dallas. I live in Fort Worth, and I was going to Dallas every Thursday, and with meeting of people that were constitutionalists that were, interested in changing the way things were going. I met a lot of interesting people. It was back when Bo Greitz, who was a colonel in Special Forces, he was going around lecturing about what they were up to about house-to-house search and seizure for guns.
Right.
And now this is 25 years ago.
Wow.
And a number of the people in the Army came out and whistle blew on it. It was stopped. They were going to chip everybody. They were going to give them a flu shot. We're going to pick up the people on the blacklist.
Yeah.
What do you think Jade Helm 15 was a practice for?
What do you think the fusion centers are for?
Right. Well, we saw just what FEMA is for, just what a number of these other organizations that FEMA has taken over,
mm-hmm.
what they are for whenever we had this flood near Houston. And we had people, volunteers going down there, and they were armed because they were told when they went down there, you'd better be armed because there are going to be some desperate people you'll have to deal with.
Right.
So they go down here, and I knew one of them, and he wrote and talked on talk shows about what he saw. But they were cordoning off areas where people couldn't get out,
yep.
and letting water out of spillways, drowning them, and their bodies going out to sea.
And not letting people in.
Saw that. He saw that, and he wrote about it. And
I remember that.
I saw a video that was made of this homeless guy leaning up against the pillar of a store, and they go up and they ask him, now, why don't you go to the Salvation Army? It was Salvation Army or it was...
I remember that one, too.
Something. Yeah. And he said, no, I'm not going there. They are killing people.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, are you sure? And he said, yes, I am. I'm not going there. I'll stay out in the cold.
Yeah. And I can't rule it out. In this crazy world, you just cannot rule that out anymore.
Well, here comes FEMA trying to take everybody's guns away. And he said, no, you're not taking our guns away. These are people that are down there helping people, getting them out of the water, saving people.
Yeah.
And they know if they give their guns away, they're dead too.
Mm-hmm.
They won't give their guns away. And he said that's the only way I made it out of there alive.
Exactly.
And, when Katrina hit New Orleans, it wasn't the storm that decimated downtown New Orleans and all those homes that were, low-income housing homes. It was that they were blowing up those flood control locks all over the city.
The locks,
and flooding them out. They were blowing it. The people could hear the dynamite.
Yeah, I know.
It was a land grab scheme. And even the way that they treated the refugees, they created, putting them in that stadium with disease and everything else, lack of water, lack of food. You know,
like they did to my ancestors when they put them in the reform schools. They put them they put all the kids with TB together so that they all get the infection.
Oh, well, they gave the Navajo wool. You know, the Navajo are great weavers, and they gave the Navajo wool that was contaminated with smallpox.
Yeah.
I mean, the Department of the Interior, which has an agency called Indian Affairs, they're the rottenest people on earth. And I was going to take a history course, a graduate level history course, in the American Indian. And when I went in, first day, this guy's talking, he comes out and he says, this is a professor, this PhD. He says, well, they talk about the vanishing Indian, but actually there are as many Indians here today as there was at the time of Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, what about the Europeans? The same population for them too? And he just shut me off. I knew that I had to drop that class.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing about it is, if it was just a clear out case of people just saying to me, okay, look, you guys, we came over here, our ancestors conquered you, you guys lost, buck it up. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all.
No.
They tricked us.
We had Indian allies that fought with us in the French and Indian War.
Yeah.
The whole Algonquin nation fought for us. What do we do with them? I mean, these were cultured people. You can see pictures of their attire, what they wore. They had the wheel. They were very eloquent people, quick to learn. And we drove them west, forced them off their land, drove them west, and they became Plains Indians. And they are incorporated in with the Plains Indians, whether it was mound builders or whether it was cliff dwellers or whether it was people in the desert, We threw them off on land we didn't think anybody would ever need or use. And then the railroads. And the railroads, killed the buffalo. The railroads took over land. You were given 10 miles on each side of the track for building a railroad.
There's this, roughly 500-year history of just not really coming together. It's just not happening. And people are giving lip service, in my opinion, to truth and reconciliation. There can never be reconciliation unless you guys are willing to hear the truth first. We can't just move on and pretend it's all in the past and blah, blah, blah. It's ongoing.
It's ongoing. Let me tell you my experience. The Navajo Reservation out of Farmington. I've been out there a couple of times, and each time I go out there, I face the same thing. The first time I went out there, I had a pickup loaded with stuff that this church was going to donate to the Navajo. And so I get out there, and I get with a lady who has a mobile mission, Christian mission. And she knows everybody. She knows all the clans. If you didn't know, it's a matriarchal society, so Auntie runs everything in a clan. So I'm out there with my last wife and talking with one of their elders, and I say, on this whole reservation, you have only one well. How would you like to have a well for every clan? And he said, what? I said, yeah. I said, I passed through Midland, Odessa, and ever since the oil depletion allowance, all these roughnecks are looking for work. All these rigs are rusting. I said, I can raise the money and I can get roughnecks to show your people how to drill for water using oil rigs. And he said, well, I'll take it to the council. They refused because they control the rest of the tribe with that one well. That means if you're an Indian and you buy a pickup, brand new pickup, and every other day or so you got to put 2 55-gallon drums in your pickup, go to the well, which may be 40 miles away, fill it up with water, fill those drums up with water, come back, go down one creek and another because those roads are like that. They're actually Jeep roads. But now you're hauling all that water in a pickup. How long do you think the struts on that pickup are going to last? Or the suspension system? It's not. So after 2 years, that's worn out. And, there are people there that plant corn. Never comes to fruition. Never. Nothing. In fact, one of the claims I went to was cornfield. And, my wife's in the house with Auntie, who's selling her some made in Mexico jewelry. It's not even sterling, for Navajo made. And it's not, and I'm out in the yard with these braves and young ladies, and they're saying, well, they like me. And they say, that's phony stuff in there. And I said, I know. It's not even turquoise. And they look at me, well, why are you letting her buy it? Because it'll make her happy, and you guys need the money, don't you? And they love me after that. And they're telling me where all the gold is that they won't touch. Indians won't touch gold.
Yeah. And
they're telling me where all the gold is. And they tell me where all the gold that has been secreted from the conquistador days, when the Indians were fighting them, and they'd win and they'd take everything and they'd put it in this one place.
Right.
He told me where it was. Now, that's something for him to tell white eyes where the gold is,
Well, so yeah, the thing with the modern reserve system is what we've got to realize is, and what North America is starting to wake up to, is the fact that this is now, according to policy, basically one large reserve. And, non-Aboriginals are waking up to this fact now. But it has been this way for some time. Probably I would venture to guess it began in 1972, when they went off the gold standard.
Well, they actually went off gold standard before then. They passed the Gold Reclamation Act in 1934. And for 40 years, it was against the law to own gold unless it was a rare American coin, or the gold in your teeth, or in your jewelry.
Right. So basically what I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is the takeover of the Federal Reserve, which began in 1913 to 1933, right?
Yes. Well, that was another thing. What was bad is that when in 1934 they had Black Thursday, and nobody knew that the Gold Reclamation Act had been passed. What they did is they closed all the banks, and they didn't open up until that next Tuesday. And when they did, people went in, and everybody's safe deposit box had been looted of all the gold and silver. They never got it back. They never got recompense for it.
Wow.
And you'll never guess where all those gold coins, St. Gaudens gold coins, et cetera, went.
Well, they didn't go to Fort Knox.
Who got them? Nope, they didn't go to Fort Knox.
I would say they went to the Queen. That'd be my guess.
Beg your pardon?
I'd say they went to the Queen. That'd be my guess.
Well, everything is coordinated between the people at that time that own cartels, like railroads, oil,
right,
platinum, all these cartels, diamonds, and the Rockefellers had managed to go to Argentina and buy up as much of the pampas as they could, and they started raising beef. And they would ship it back to the United States and undercut the prices of the meat market here. And then they would go to the Argentinian government and say, we want to give this to you as a deficit against the United States. And when you go to claim it to be paid, demand gold. And since, here's the thing, at that time, gold in the United States was kept at an artificially low price. It never was over $42.50 and usually around $38 an ounce, while it was going $100 or more on the London Metals Exchange. So they were getting paid and making money on the gold, plus getting the gold. Well, most of that gold that was taken on Black Thursday, rifled from American people, went to Argentina to pay off that deficit. Now, I knew a former CIA agent who was retired, and I met him at the citywide garage sale in Austin, Texas, when I was a flea market dealer. And he and his wife, every month they had that, and we started setting up with each other, and got to be pretty good friends. And one day he comes in, and he's got a very rare St. Gaudens piece, one of only 4 known. And he says, "You think this is real?" And I looked at it very carefully, and I said, "Yeah, it's real." And he said, "What do you think it's worth?" And I said, "I would begin at saying $250,000. And he said, "That's right. You're an honest man." And I said, "How'd you get it?" And he says, "Well, when I was in the CIA, they would send me to Argentina to go from bank to bank. And they would bring out, I'd go to the special room, they'd bring out these bags, St. Gaudens gold pieces. I'd go through them for coins that were worth more than their intrinsic value. And this one I just kept." Said, "Oh, really?" More power to him. More power to him.
No kidding.
I've known a number of people there that I know a fella, Ed Storm, who was selling these miniature cacti. And they came from South Africa. His job was, he was stationed in South Africa in what's called a dead zone. It's an area of high strangeness.
Okay.
And they told everybody that it is a condemned or closed diamond field. But it's not. It's just that they want to be on top of anything like that and figure out what's going on before anyone else does. That's why they build these Army Air Corps bases, or built them here in Texas at 2 different places, and elsewhere. They were built there primarily to make sure they had control of the area until they could figure out what the hell that anomaly or strangeness was associated with. Same reason that Bigelow bought that ranch. So you have all of this going on, and at the same time you have an immense problem with trying to get information because, in this country, there are so many intelligence agencies that keep secrets that, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, literally.
Yeah.
And the bad thing about classification and the bad thing about security practices among corporations or whatever is the information doesn't get out in the public, where you might find some kid, 12, 13 years old, who's a damn genius, who can put things together for you that the scientists can't. Like Tesla.
Right.
We don't know how many Teslas we've got who would come out and really bloom, really blossom, and maybe get us off this planet for good. Maybe do a lot of things that because these people that are so worried about their paycheck and their profession and everything are, they are stifled to comply with these security classifications, these over-specializations and everything. Because, Skunk Works doesn't want anybody to get an overview. They don't want anybody to figure out what the whole contraption is all about they're working on. Getting little bits and pieces. How do you get anywhere like that?
For sure. That's the whole thing with compartmentalization. It's so effective.
Right. You said the secret word. Do you remember Groucho Marx?
Yeah.
You remember the little bird that came down when you said the secret word?
Yeah, I do, actually.
You just got the little bird.
That's funny. So,
I'll tell you what, do you remember Ernie Kovacs?
I remember the name. I'm terrible with names and faces.
I love that guy. I love that guy. He was the beginning of the night show host.
Okay.
And he was married to Edie Gourmet, beautiful woman, lovely voice, and he always smoked a cigar, and he was a character beyond characters. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was great. But he was the beginning of the night show host, late night show host, and he'd do things like, "Well, tonight we're selling a bag of rags for $13. Send your money in, blah blah blah." I love that. Oh man,
that's great. But I was wondering, what is the most important thing for you, like as you get older, that you want the young ones to know? Like the ones who are being programmed now with all this nonsense in their head. Like about trans this and, and just, ignoring the sky being sprayed and just in totally oblivious to what's going on. What would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that there is more operating on them than they may know. Whatever they do, not to get 5G, to read good literature, the best literature that's been written.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
And it will span into a reality that you've been forbidden.
Well, and I just wanted to interject and say that, nowadays, now that we do have the internet, and the internet isn't the end-all and be-all of everything, but it is a good source of general information of which you can follow up in the library.
I agree, but then again, for every person that uses it for research and information, there are 4 or 5 people that are using it as a social media alone. And they're offended by people like you and me. They really are. I don't know why that is. I don't understand it to begin with, but
maybe because our efforts at knowing more threatens their comfort zone.
I believe it does. I think that one of the things that I would stress to them is to realize with the situation that they are seeing develop today between conservatives and liberals, or not liberals, socialists, communists.
Irrationalists.
That all they have to do is look at recent history to see whose side they should be on.
Mm-hmm.
The American way of life has always been generous to opportunity.
That's true, yeah.
How would you like to all of a sudden have a stone wall where there was opportunity? That is communism. I mean, there are a lot of people that are not happy with their place in life, but there's always a chance for changing that in a society that we have had and that is supported by our Constitution. If the left has its way, that all ends. That all ends. It has nothing to do with wealthy people. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with our sense of right and wrong. It has everything to do with how we perceive reality.
Well, and apparently how they feel about reality more so than reason. I mean, what I see is irrational behavior.
It is irrational, but you have to understand, people here have a split consciousness. And if they hear the same thing at the right age, which is 5 to 7, they hear the same thing over and over again, they build a comfort zone around it, whether it's good or bad.
Right.
We call it a syndrome when it's bad, but when we think it's good, it becomes political correctness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does political correctness have to do with this? You know, have you ever been around somebody that is so self-righteous that they feel an animus towards any different way of looking at things than theirs? Not just with religion, but with anything that, you know, that is an issue.
Yeah, because it's not their mind, it's their heart. Their heart is closed off.
Yes, and they are convinced. I mean, it's one of the things that is notorious is they are convinced that statistics, that economy, that conflict, that all of these things are somebody else's fault. If the economy is working great, it's not a matter of the jobs it's creating or whatever. Look at President Trump. I mean, he's made more difference than the last 5 presidents put together.
Mm-hmm.
He's made a greater difference than them. And he's the only thing standing between China putting the finishing touches on their illicit practices in this country, buying a naval base, taking the same advantage of people and congresswomen, and moving in on our patents, selling us poisoned dog food, poisoned hair, you know, killing people of their own that are healthy while their organs are taken while they're still alive.
Yeah, this is
because they're gone. They have a physical program like Tai Chi, where, you know, that's become more popular than the monsters that run that country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do these things don't matter to these people. What's going on in Venezuela, where people are starving in one of the richest, resource-rich countries in South America.
Okay.
Second only to Brazil.
Right, the Amazon.
I mean, wake up! I would shake them until their brains started working.
Yeah, it's like the situation with the housing up north on the reserves. I think what they should be doing is growing hemp, because that solves all your fiber, all your surface, all your construction material. That covers everything. So, and it's renewable.
Yes, and it is useful. You know, I would love to have an effective form of grass for pain.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, what they sell is not. I've got some stuff here that if you take enough of it will affect the pain, but you can't afford to keep it on a basis that I need it, because I've got wounds that are painful all the time.
Well, do you eat it or smoke it?
I don't take it. You know, I don't have weed. No.
No, what I'm asking you, the best form of that stuff, the most effective form, is to try to obtain the oil, which is, it will affect you psychosomatically. It will affect your head, but it also is the most effective. I've heard reports that if you put it on an external tumor, it'll fall off in like 3 days. But it's got to be this super concentrated oil, they call it. Well, you boil the leaves down, and basically you boil them, and you get an oil from it, basically, and that's what you want to use topologically or to eat, not to smoke.
Well, my problem are wounds, and you can't put oil on a wound.
Right.
So, I know what'll heal these wounds. I can't get it. Can't afford it. And I can't get I don't have Medicare because I get too much from the VA.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I'm told.
It's incredible the disincentives that all of these social programs have ended up fulfilling their opposite function of maintaining.
Well, the VA has gone through the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since Obama, I've been getting VA care for over 50 years, since 1965.
Right.
And I've seen it go up and down. But after Obama, it went through the floor. You get disinformation. You find people that are hostile, aggressive, violent. They work there. And they don't mind sharing their evil with you.
Yeah.
I've seen all kinds of criminal things when I was over in the VA nursing home on campus with the VAH in Dallas. And I saw criminal things. Not just unto me, unto others,
Yeah.
No fresh food. The damn food is trucked in, already prepared from 90 miles away, kept warm all day, and then superheated before it's served. The evening meal is not fit for pigs.
It's exactly why I plan to, when I, at a certain point, decide whether I just want to wander off and, go lay down in the forest rather than die in a hospital.
Well, I understand how you feel. I'm never going back inside. I won't even go there for wound treatment because they do something obsessive that they shouldn't do. That's debriding. Their idea of debriding is to make sure the wound will never heal. Because when it starts to heal, they'll remove that healthy scab and bore into it and make it larger.
Yeah, I know. It's a very strange practice.
It's obsessive because they don't have competent orthopedic surgeons there. They got the biggest hospital in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They've got billions of dollars worth of equipment in it, and they don't have a competent orthopedic surgeon. No, they got sawbones. Mm-hmm. So their idea is to keep any wound that's critical from ever healing, so you'll lose your leg, your foot, or whatever, because they got a really good prosthetic department. And I'm not kidding.
I refer to all of this as management. It's all managing illness. It's allopathic medicine, as I'm sure you know. The Rockefellers invented it, set it up. But it's not meant to cure. It's meant to maintain and to create profit and opportunity.
Well, that is inherent in Obama-Wama's program.
Right.
I mean, people don't read it. Read it, and you'll find an end-of-life counseling.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You ever hear of Soylent Green? Ever hear of Soylent Green?
Precisely. But we don't need that. I mean, 50% of our food is being wasted anyway before it gets to our dinner plate, and even after it reaches our table, 50% of it is gone.
April, have you seen that video this fellow made who went behind Walmart? And there were all these buggies out there.
Yes, I did.
Carts, all full of fresh food.
Yeah.
Food that had not expired, milk, hams, all kinds of stuff. And there were literally 75 or 80 of them out there. They were waiting for a dump truck to come and take them off to the dump.
Yeah, and like a week later, they probably shut it down, right?
They ran him off. He was asking, why don't you let people come in that are hungry and take this?
Yeah.
And they ran him off. Walmart is a New World Order organization. Remember the strange crap going on in all those Walmarts during Jade Health 15?
And also remember that when you transpose the letters Mart, Wall, you get martial law.
Well, we would have been in it if Hillary had won by 2017.
Like, you get what I'm saying? Mart law. Law Mart?
Yeah.
Mart law. Mart law.
Martial law.
Yeah.
They tried to create circumstances, false flags, twice that I stopped. And I've got proof of it.
I think the key lies in a lot of this into coordinating the fusion centers, and I think the fusion centers are key to this new order they're trying to establish of authority. They want to establish a different style of authority, and it's more like boot camp than anything else.
That's behind gun control.
Yeah, precisely.
And you can't get this through the snowflake's head.
I know.
But you can kill more people with a match than you can a bullet.
Especially in Southern California. And that's no joke.
They're doing it, aren't they?
Yeah. And I heard a video from a guy that said that you guys just don't realize what's going on down here. It's way worse than you can ever imagine.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, what kind of a mentality creates a sanctuary city or a sanctuary county or a sanctuary state? What kind of a mentality does that?
Well, I can't remember what it's called. PG&E. It's the utility companies. That's who I think is directly responsible. It's the same here with Manitoba Hydro. They've tapped right into Indian land. They've moved Indians off their land so that we can all have water here. And they have brown water, 15 people a house.
Well, that I mentioned this before, that the drought in California is man-made.
Oh, absolutely. As is much of the changes in weather right now.
It's not weather. This water was contracted from other states to California, and Nestle bought it out.
If you look into Jim Lee's work, you'll realize that the biggest wet dream that the military has ever had is to control the weather. And a lot of these changes that we're seeing with droughts and whatnot are strategic future warfare plans. That's all they are.
Well, in this case, it's not them, though. In this case, it's Nestle buying up the water rights that would provide water for California from other states that has in the past. And Nestle is the biggest provider of bottled water.
I'm trying to remember what you said earlier on that first story you said about Argentina. Somebody went to Argentina. I know I'm jumping around, but there was something really important I wanted to say, and that is the biggest aqueduct in the world is in Argentina, and that's where all the Nazis, well, a third of them apparently went during Paperclip.
Well, they found a government, though, that was very friendly. And, of course, nobody talks about the biggest corporation in Argentina, Bunt. Nobody talks about that.
Right.
It was built on Nazi gold.
Mm-hmm.
And it is in mind control, the industry of mind control, in a big way. And it pioneered RCID, radio control implant device. And I'll tell you one person that was used on, Jack Ruby.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was a little Doug Gatto-ish, thinking about it.
When Jack Ruby was in his right mind, and Earl Warren went to see him in the jail after he'd killed or actually just shot Oswald, because Oswald didn't die from the gunshot wound. He died from embolism, and that was the cause of death the coroner gave him.
Right.
But when Jack Ruby was visited with Earl Warren, he pleaded with Earl Warren to take him back to Washington, D.C., and he'd tell everything. And Earl Warren said, why? And he said, I wouldn't live 5 minutes in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And Earl Warren told him, well, if you're afraid you might say something that would be dangerous, don't say it. Earl Warren was the sponsor for the Warren Commission report.
Okay.
Does that sound like, hey, what he said at the beginnings of the hearings on the Warren Commission report was that we were here to prove that this is not a country where this sort of thing happens. In other words, a conspiracy.
Yeah. Interesting how they can prove a negative.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's what he proceeded. And there are things in the Warren Commission that blow it to hell, but people just don't read.
Yeah.
Don't read shit.
Yeah,
I mean, pardon me for saying that. I get irritated by the fact of so many people not reading anything.
Yeah, apologies, listeners. I should have mentioned we do get frustrated sometimes talking about these subjects. And rightfully so, because, you walk around, I walk around year-round here. I'm amongst the folks all the time. So I have a real good sense of where people are at. And I tell you, people are not with it at all. They're so divided. They're so divided up into their own little interest areas, their own little specialties. It's like watching the CIA without a building.
Well, I think one of the best things that has happened that's not getting any coverage is that the NSA no longer provides the CIA with all the intelligence the CIA asks for. And I know that to be a fact.
Well, with the Five Eyes, I think they can get it where more than one place.
Well, domestic, they're not allowed to operate domestically, so they've relied on either the NSA or the FBI. Mm-hmm. Now, if the FBI is cleaned up, that's another angle. They won't have the Five Eyes.
Right. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that to end because you know where that leads. That leads to Panopticon. That's where that leads.
Oh, I'm for wiping them out. I'm for just abolishing the CIA and putting all those people to work doing something else.
Yeah, like building islands out in the middle of nowhere.
Maybe. Maybe so. I mean, a lot of the people in the CIA went in there thinking that they were working for their government or working for the country. But they couldn't have been in there very long before they discovered that wasn't true.
Yeah, you couldn't be there.
The CIA has never been about working for the public, working for the people of this country. CIA has always worked for oil companies, central banking, and it has become a criminal organization that is responsible for most of the heroin that comes into this country, for child trafficking, for human trafficking.
Well, isn't it something like a third of the operating budget of the government?
Yeah. Well, they have convinced a lot of people in high places that are soulless to begin with that this is the only way to prop up the dollar after they lose the petrodollar, and they've lost it.
Yeah.
They've lost it.
I think people don't realize that we're on the cusp of world shift, if it hasn't happened already, because the BRICS nations are getting along fine. Saudi Arabia and Israel are going to divide up Greater Israel. They're going to make a peace deal. They're going to build the third temple. They're going to start doing their god-awful satanic rituals there, or whatever rituals you want to call it. I'm alleging that they're unholy, but I could be wrong. I think bad things are going to happen because of it.
If indeed what a lot of people that are in the know have said, and I'm talking about former agents, former bankers, have said that Epstein was working more for the Mossad than anyone else. And if that's true, there has been a struggle in Israel going on between Netanyahu and the people that want him replaced.
Well, and also puts a little bit different slant on Microsoft having their research and development headquartered there. Makes me wonder why that is now.
Well, Microsoft should have been changed into a number of different corporations back before the turn of the millennium, and it was going to. And in the middle of everything, Microsoft sells the Germans all of their government operating systems. And after the Germans have them for a month or two, they send them all back with the statement, if we wanted to network with Langley, we'd do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you were a paranoid type of mind, and if you were conspiratorial, you might even think that the reason that the headquarters are in Israel is because Israel has already got the backdoor key to every computer in North America, as some have speculated.
They have something worse than that. They have blackmail cards.
Mm.
Not just what Epstein affords them,
Yeah,
but worldwide.
Well, yeah, and also the digital technology and the AI is getting so sophisticated that that blackmail isn't going to work much longer, because you're going to be able to simulate it as though the person actually did it.
Well, President Trump has put forth support for a number of bills that have been challenged by lower courts that really have the authority to do it, but do it anyway. And these courts have judges that have been infiltrated by Illuminati. Police departments have been infiltrated by the Illuminati. Who does the Illuminati work for? It's real simple.
The elites.
It's real simple who they work for. Yeah.
As far as I can tell, the only people who would have any use for them would be the elites.
The Rothschilds.
Yeah.
They are the Rothschilds' 2 million man criminal army. And they've infiltrated, of all things, PTAs.
Mm-hmm.
They've infiltrated everything. If you cut half the journalists, so-called journalists that work for the hoard out mass media, they'll bleed Illuminati.
Well, that's probably because they're both Masons anyway, so the judge and the one being convicted.
They're Masons, and then they are Masons. You're thinking of 33rd degree Masons.
No, I'm just saying that any two Masons have to protect. Any two Masons or Freemasons have to protect each other's interests.
Well, most Masons aren't conspiratorial. They're there because of businesses. They're there for
No, I know that.
Whatever.
We're talking about a minority of people. I know that. I've studied this to death.
But there are organizations within the Masons they don't speak of. One of them is the Jesters. And to be a member of the Jesters, you have to be a member of the International Magicians Guild.
Right.
Magicians that make the perfect spies. Houdini was a spy.
For sure.
For sure. He's a good man.
Well, and who else but a spy needed all that techniques to get in and out of rooms?
Well, they perform in front of the heads of government in courts. A lot of them, like Houdini, were idolized. Houdini was a very handsome man. He was very adept at what he did, and he actually went beyond magic in the sense of illusion. He went beyond it. Now, there are magicians that will agree to that. I knew a man who was the longest-standing president of the International Magicians Guild, and he did too. And he was not entirely human. And I knew him. And his name was Ren Clark. Now, if you try to discuss Ren Clark with any of these guild members, they'll shut up on you so fast it'll make your head swim, and even threaten you. Because they knew that he was beyond illusion.
Yeah, he was the real deal, so to speak.
Well, when I was invited by Ren Clark's niece that inherited his estate, went to his home to give her some idea of what she could expect to get from some Oriental antiques that Ren Clark had. And she wanted to redo his house, redecorate it and everything, and wanted to sell some of these antiques for the money. And I saw a number of fantastic things, but I went into this bedroom, and there on that bed were 5 Chinese emperor's robes, real ones. No museum has one of these. They're all in tombs. What was he doing with them?
Mm-hmm.
They were the real thing. And she said, well, what can I get for these? And I said, I won't take them. I won't touch them. And I'm going to tell you it's dangerous for people to even know you have these. They're priceless. No museum has anything like this. And she said, well, he wore them when he was performing for people at home. He had a stage in his house. I said, really? There's only one way that Rand Clark got those robes. From there were 7 robes in all, from 7 different dynasties. 2 of them I didn't count because they were more modern. I wouldn't call them true emperors. The Dowager Empress and the last emperor that, the Japanese compromised. But what do you think of that? And only one way that Rand Clark got those robes. One way.
Speaking of the Japanese, I was reminded of, have you heard of the Farsight Institute? I'm sure you have. Farsight? So they do a lot of remote viewing and whatnot. And anyway, I was watching them one day, and this thing came up. It had nothing to do with that. I was in the middle of that, and suddenly this thing came up where this guy was talking about how the Japanese during the war, and this seems totally feasible to me, I just haven't verified it yet, sent up balloons that followed the air currents all the way over to North America to drop, I don't know what, neurotoxins or whatever, on parts of North America. I can't remember where it came up, but they did land here. I'm just curious whether you ever heard of that.
Well, if they had the technology to do that, they would have done it. What they did to people and, what they continued doing up until early 50s, just as bad as anything that has been attributed to the Germans and worse.
And America's own torture chambers.
Yeah, and they've explored the world with secret technology to enhance certain things that you shouldn't be doing. They're worse than the usual eugenist.
So speaking of eugenics and the future course of mankind kind of thing, we've got about a 12.5 to 13,000-year-old cycle here where we seem to get wiped out by some either natural occurring phenomenon or something else occurs. Maybe you could talk a bit about the EMVs in this history of the past 12,500 years. How do they tie in?
Well, you've had 6 extinctions, and each one because you allowed your technology to run away with you, just like you did on Mars. Only in this case, it was compounded by the fact that you had split consciousness that you didn't have while you were on Mars, and you had a caste system that has become what you call the elite today.
Right.
That when halls of records have been found, have been secreted immediately, like the one in the Busegi Mountain, and been used to help recreate the tyrannical and persevering elite machine. Through all of this, there has been a group that has survived by having had access to what was necessary to enable them to survive an extinction.
Right, especially the knowledge that it was coming, right?
Well, they are the fabric that in many cases has led to changes that have improved things and given mankind a chance to improve beyond what the last extinction accomplished. And we know them by the name Etruscan. In Egypt, they were a priest caste. In China, they were a priest caste. They fled China and came to the Central American coast on the Pacific side. It's trans-Pacific migration, and founded the Toltec civilization, the first monument builders in the New World. 6,000 years ago, they extincted. disappeared, whatever you want to call it. And, that's similar to what happened to the Anasazi. That's similar to what happened to North American culture that left its own Stonehenge in upper New England.
We're talking about a lot of things that are going on in the world, and what I'm wondering is, what do you think the most pressing thing is for us right now?
The most pressing thing is obviously getting President Trump his second term.
Right. What will that accomplish in the long term?
He'll have free rein to do the things he wanted to do, which will benefit the majority of Americans, a vast majority of Americans, even snowflakes that don't know diddle, and advance this country by returning it to some of the values that it had before. Political correctness raised its ugly head.
Yeah.
And so many people lost their common sense.
Yeah, and I think they're going to continue to keep losing their common sense because I don't know. I don't think it's been at its worst yet. I don't think people have been illogical as they can be yet, unfortunately.
I think you may be wrong there. I don't see anybody being more illogical in the history of this world than Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and Nadler. Nasty Nadler. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that.
Yeah, and it was strange. Somebody made some kind of slowed down version of Nancy Pelosi and made a joke about her being drunk, and this speaks to political correctness again because everyone was getting all upset and they were saying that they were attacking her and all this, and it was just a lighthearted joke, like a slow motion of her moving around like she might have been tipsy or something, like lighten up, people. Holy.
Well, she goes on automatic, and she's got a narrative down, but it doesn't hang together because none of it's true. Anybody that believes that she prays all the time for President Trump, wagging their finger at people,
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too that the thing with Trump getting in again is it will avoid a lot of the damage that the other side can do. And I'm actually hoping that our future holds more like some of the European countries where we'll have more selection between political parties, like that will have the option for socialism, that will have the option for democracy, that will have the option for progressivism, will have the option for whatever it is, but that we have a diverse range of voices out there. Because right now it's just two halves of the same bird.
Well, I wouldn't plug diversity.
Well, I don't mean diversity in the sense that it's normally used. That's for sure. I mean just diverse in the sense of having more than one political theory, more than one economic approach to some of these major issues that we're facing. Like, for example, unemployment and automation of jobs. Unless that tide is reversed, things are only going to get worse.
Well, there are always ways of creating jobs for people that will work. There are always ways of doing that, and Trump has shown that. But you have to understand, to some people, jobs don't mean a damn thing. Power does.
Yeah.
When AOC used her clout to keep Amazon from headquartering in New York City, she cost 25,000 jobs for New Yorkers that could at least have had work. Well-paid work. And now she is now moving her mouth and trying to act like there was some good reason for it, which there wasn't. Creating jobs is not what these people are about.
Securing their own position is what they're about.
It's not about improving this country in any way. The infrastructure is really suffering.
Yeah, and it's not getting any better either.
No, but that's because it takes two parties working together to get things done on a scale that would exceed what President Trump's already done. He's done everything he could do with his emergency acts, which he's invoked.
Right.
Like working on the wall.
So where do you see, with Trump getting in, part of it is also just avoiding something worse for some people, right? Like for some people, politics is a negative, and if you're going to choose, then you're going to choose the lesser of two evils, that kind of thinking. And it's like, what other alternatives are there than Clinton?
You go to the social contract for your answers, and in our case, it's the Constitution.
Right.
Who upholds the Constitution should be the winner. Who threatens, who wants to revise any activism whatsoever is the enemy.
Oh, okay.
You have a social contract. That social contract provides for everyone if followed to the letter.
See, because for me, I think recently I've kind of come to this place where I've realized that there are two different kinds of people, or people might be divided into two different categories. Those who are life-affirming and those who are doing something else. So to me, it comes down to a pretty clear division along those lines. But I don't know. My view changes over time, but I think this one's going to stick.
Well, I see President Trump is pretty life-affirming compared to anything that the demon rats are.
Mm-hmm.
And I call them demon rats because I am disgusted. I was a Democrat years ago, back when Jim Wright was Speaker of the House. The Clintons axed him. And after that, they just went down the drain.
You think that has something to do with maybe a lot of cocaine being imported? Because what year was that? Because in around 1982 is when it all fell apart, in my view.
Well, I know some things that most people don't know about what happened to Jim Wright. He was an honest politician. He was a career politician, but he was honest. He didn't have millions of dollars.
Right.
Like Pelosi. There's 160 million.
Yeah. I just meant the general downturn in things, not just politically, but also financially, seemed to me to occur when there was this large influx in around 1982 or 83, somewhere in there. A large amount of cocaine came into North America in around that time. And they shut down a whole bunch of music places and ended up opening up banks, and it was just like they changed the whole landscape. It was very weird.
I think the primary problem with America has and still is the IMF.
Right.
The tentacles are the IRS. How much money do you think that they're seeping from this economy? Every penny of income tax that is paid in this country goes to the IMF to pay on the debt. The debt that was accrued because they printed money. That's all. They didn't do anything else, just print money.
Mm-hmm.
By controlling the money flow, they were able to create the Depression, 1929, and control recessions or whatever suited their plans at the moment. And knowing when it was going to happen made them that much richer.
Insecure, yeah.
So it was like the rigged roulette wheels that Las Vegas gets in Cincinnati from the Cincinnati Card Company. Cincinnati Card Company, if you realize that, the Cincinnati Card Company makes marked cards, but you have to buy a case of them. So the only people who are going to buy a case of marked cards are the casinos.
Right? Yeah. But it's not just that. At some point, Like in 2007, 2008, when there was that bursting of bubbles and whatnot, when people just went back to the status quo, like, I don't know, like, what's wrong with people? How could you just go and then mess up and then not recognize that you messed? I guess it's like gambling. It must be like gambling. That's the only thing I can imagine.
You know, there's something concrete behind every one of those recessions.
Mm-hmm.
Number one was, do you remember junk bonds?
Yeah, exactly. That's the stuff I'm talking about.
Okay. What happened at the same time that junk bonds became the end thing?
I can't. Something with interest rates? I can't remember.
The savings and loans were deregulated
Oh,
by
okay. Right,
Ronald
right,
Reagan.
right.
And so many people use junk bonds to secure loans from savings and loans that the savings and loans failed. But all that money went somewhere. Where'd it go? And
Into
with it went
assets.
a lot of people's pension funds, a lot of people's anything that was not secured to be backed by the government, the FDIC, lost everything. And a lot of brokers had tied all kinds of portfolios up in junk bonds. And when these savings and loans failed, they took all that paper with them. But where did the money go?
Into assets.
Brokers, the people that were manipulating the portfolios.
Right.
They knew what was going to happen. They knew that the junk bonds were not secured, that they were mere paper.
Yeah, I had the honor, I had this distinct honor. One of the first people that I interviewed was Paul Hellier, the Canadian ex-minister. I think he's like 96 now. And I interviewed him about 4 or 5 years ago. We spoke about nothing but the banking system and the cabal and this whole setup where, Canada's unique in the sense that it has a bank where its people can borrow the money from itself, but we've given over our banking to the private banking interests. So it's the private interests, the same with the Federal Reserve, that is really messing with everything. It's the private interests.
Well, Canadian banking was taken over by American banks back in '69. And I can tell you who engineered that.
Who's that?
You want to know?
Yeah.
The Ford Foundation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the thing about Ford is I've always been suspicious of Ford because of his role in mass production and separating people.
Well, Ford was an interesting guy. Now, he was dead when that happened. Because it happened in 1969. But Ford perfected the assembly line so well that he was the first to be able to pay his workers a reasonable salary.
Right.
A wage. And you know what that was?
No, I don't.
$25 a week.
No, I figured it was like 2 cents an hour.
And all the other Detroit automobile manufacturers declared war on him. Yeah, literal war.
Right.
Pinkertons, Gatling guns, the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm. Especially after
Finally,
his use of marijuana.
When they couldn't kill Henry Ford, they sued for a peace. And he showed up in Detroit. They had a big meeting. He walked in, he said only one thing. He said, I want my workers to afford my car. Walked out. In my opinion, that makes him a great man.
Right.
Now, there are things I don't like about him. He was one of the biggest contributors to the brown shirts in Germany. He had some problems, he didn't like unions. But I don't like unions today because they have no collective bargaining power. So what good are they? The only reason they get their dues is they convince Deadwood that they'll protect their jobs no matter how poor a worker they are, which
Right.
forces other workers that are productive to pay union dues, so they have protection too, but they don't improve salaries or cost of living. They don't improve working conditions. They're just mobsters. Unions are no better than mobsters.
Absolutely.
Extorting money they don't earn.
Absolutely. The unions used to actually serve a function. Now they don't.
There's a lot of things I like about Ronald Reagan, and there are a lot of things I don't like about him, but you can thank him for that. Because you remember what the first thing he did when he came into the White House?
No, I don't. Not offhand.
He fired all the air traffic controllers.
Oh, okay, right.
The only union that unanimously supported him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that sound like Ronald Reagan to you? By then, I think he was totally under control.
Yeah.
Bush was running everything.
That's odd.
Because I don't think he would have done that normally. No.
Because I never thought of him as a great intellect or genius or anything. I thought he was pretty bright, but I always thought...
Oh, he was.
I always thought he was at least a man who had a vision.
He did. He did when he was in California. He did. He was very conservative. And at the time, I wasn't nearly that conservative. But I liked him. I liked him because, well, I shared a lot of things with him, a lot of values with him. I didn't vote for him. But then he changed. And a lot of people still thought it was Alzheimer's. But the truth is it wasn't. Because when he had to give a speech, it was a dandy. He was a great orator.
Right.
And I think that something was going on there. I think that Bush was using something on him. Mm-hmm. And I think Nancy was going along with the program.
Well, hey, all they had to do was put aspartame in his jelly beans. That would have been enough.
Enough of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough of it would. Enough of it would. You know what that crap is made from? Aluminum waste.
Yeah.
But they know that aluminum poisoning will simulate Alzheimer's.
I know. I go to Aboriginal Women's Warrior meetings every Thursday, and we often have a small meal during our meetings. And, because of, well, everybody's poor, right, in these organizations, so not much is affordable. But I figured at least the cookware should not be aluminum.
That's right. I agree with you there. I agree with you, and it makes the food taste different too. I applied for immigration status once to Canada, and the Canadian government turned me down because I was a disabled vet.
Oh, really? Wow. Did you not have a lot of money at that point? Because they might have...
I was offered a fellowship to Dalhousie University.
Okay.
And my professor, when I was at Michigan State, when I was in graduate school, was a former diplomat. Our department was Canadian-American Relations, or Affairs.
Right.
And we were the only school in the country that had one. And we were promised a periodical, some fellowships, and other grants. Then Nixon comes in and cuts funding to education. So all they offer Dr. Glick, more money, more of a salary. And so he was offended, and he decided to go back to Dalhousie where he had a chair. And he told me, he said, if you want to come, I'll get you anything you want. Assistantship, graduate assistantship, teaching assistantship, research assistantship, or a fellowship, whatever you want. Right. And I said, okay. So I tried to get immigration status so I could accept that, and the government wouldn't give it to me. So there went a career.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, I'd like to know, where you would like to go next with our conversation, because for a lot of people, we keep hearing people are waking up For those people who are just waking up, what would you say, like in terms of, for example, history, what they're reading in books, what they're being taught? What would you make as a general statement towards them about learning?
I would tell them to put some pressure on astrophysicists to release what some of them know, astronomers know, that they're not permitted to share with us about what's going on in the sun, about a number of things that are happening, about ETs and what EBs are, why they differ, a number of things that are known that people have a right to. Now, the RAND Corporation and others thinking think tank put out this BS back in the 60s that, oh, no, you don't want Americans to know about ET because it'll just totally destroy their peace of mind, their religion, their belief in this and that, and all that. So these other think tanks took that as an excuse for hiding the truth from people, which is just now beginning to come out, but not for good reasons. You see, military intelligence and government bureaucracies are in a pickle. They wanted to use a hostile ET invasion as the last leg to install the New World Order.
Right.
You know, there are not any EBs on Earth anymore. Nobody's being abducted or screwed with by EBs, extra biological entities, not sentient critters, but chunks of meat sewn together with a computer terminal.
Right, I've heard you use
run
that.
by a mama computer.
Yeah, I've heard you use that term before, yeah.
So they're not here anymore, so they don't have their UFOs to stage the invasion, so now they're falling back double time on the Green Deal, the new Green Deal, which is going to cost in 10 years $26 trillion. Aren't we in debt enough? Huh? I mean, who wants to go for that malarkey? You're going to have to give up your car. You're going to have to give up this, give up that, you know.
Yeah.
How about a pillbox instead of that 5-bedroom home you have? How about, you know, I mean, wake up, people. Wake up.
Yeah, and that's what I said on a post earlier on Facebook is like just texting, wake up. This 5G is being rolled out around you. You've got like cell phones giving you brain tumors. You've got GMOs giving you brain lesions. You've got, you've got these things that are being introduced into the environment on purpose to mess you up. Like, when are you going to get off your knees and start to roar?
There's so many bad things that Trump has put on the back burner that he intends to get rid of once he has his second term.
Right. I heard that about 5G.
But if he moves too fast, then the demon rats will sell him as a tyrant, more so than they have now. They'll be able more so, too, because American people, for the most part, have been sleeping giants for so long that anything that arouses them smacks of, oh, they're moving too fast. Oh, is he a tyrant?
Being
Because
asleep
he's accomplishing what has to be done.
Being asleep, and since they put the New World Order building in place, that's what I think. Been systematically put asleep and purposely fallen asleep. In 1948, when everybody got sick of the Second World War, and it was finally, oh, you put it down into writing. Yeah, okay, let's agree now. Let's go home and raise chickens and eat some eggs. Watch television. You know, when the head of CIA was asked about mind control, he laughed and said, I think it was Dulles, mind control? We don't need mind control. We have television. And that's exactly what it is.
They also had Dr. Cameron in Canada.
Yeah.
Remember Dr. Cameron?
Of course. I remember that quite well.
How many women did he screw up?
At least 5 that I know of.
Oh, more than that. That was the beginning of McUltra.
Mm-hmm. So going back a bit, we look at Project Paperclip. I think a lot of these people, that's where they're from. They're just carrying on the same experience they did before the war ended. Quite frankly, I don't think the war ended. I think it's just turned into something else. It's morphed into something else.
They want to use the Nazis, like Operation High Jump was to go down and take care of those Nazis in their base in Antarctica. No, that wasn't what it was about. There was no Nazi base in Antarctica. They had a submarine base there for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gist of it.
Right.
They couldn't afford the energy that it took to get the sister ship of the Bismarck on the sea. It just came out of dry dock and sat there on a pier because they didn't have any oil to put in it.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot were in that position at that time, right?
Well, nobody is taught the real history behind World War II.
Mm-hmm.
You know that there was a non-aggression pact that was signed between Russia or the Soviet Union and Germany. What happened to it?
That's right.
What happened to it?
Yeah, and actually,
why did Hitler invade the Soviet Union late in the year? Why did he do it? What was his beef with Stalin? It caused him to do that.
I was just going to say, kind of offhandedly, maybe he found out he was into little boys or something.
Well, Hitler knew that he could not base the German war effort on resources close at hand that he had control over.
Right.
That's what the North African campaign was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then what original plan was to get the oil and coal from Finland. So Hitler was proceeding to invade Finland when Stalin did before him. Mm-hmm. Stalin sent 3 divisions of men to take Finland, and the Finns beat their ass. So he had to send some more. But he took Finland to prevent Hitler from getting it. And the Soviets occupied Finland throughout the war to keep the Germans from having the resources they need to conduct an effective war, which they didn't have. And they tried in North Africa. And my feeling is that by the time that things were pretty secure and they were beginning to get the oil that Germany wanted, Rommel decided that, he was on the wrong side. He was a field marshal, and he was in charge of the North African campaign, which was intended to get the oil that Germany needed. So the Tirpitz, which was the sister ship of the Bismarck, never left port. Had it been in convoy with the Bismarck in the North Sea, there wouldn't have been any ships for the English to tow back.
Right.
These were the fastest battleships. They were actually battle cruisers. They carried 4 turrets of 16-inch guns and could hit you in the eye before you would come in range of them.
Yeah, state of the art.
They were that bad. The only reason they sunk the Bismarck was because a torpedo got close enough to it to hit it with a torpedo in the fuel line, which caused the enemy to be able to track it across the ocean and finally sink it.
Right.
But if it had the Tirpitz with it, no way. No way. So that was the battle for the sea right there. They don't talk about that, do they?
No, exactly. And they also don't talk about the history of pirates, if you notice.
Of pirates?
Yeah. They generally don't talk about the history of pirates. And considering...
especially buccaneers. You know what the difference between a pirate and a buccaneer is? A buccaneer is commissioned by the English against the Spanish, in the case of Drake. And, they they'd get away with all kinds of bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they're actually pirates, but they're working for a government, so they're protected.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
Even reason to believe that Francis Drake had an affair with Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I mean. It's like some of these practices of pirates have been carried over into things like government and things like policies and things like even certain rituals, I think.
Well, probably. I mean, there's all kinds of things attributed to some of the notions of loot that's been hidden, and there are things that I could talk about, but I have a project that I do not want to reveal.
Right.
About research that I've done and a code I've broken. I've been trying to reach the right people to get a permit to get it going. Somebody can help me reach Governor Abbott, I would really appreciate it.
So anyone out there knowing Governor Abbott or a way to reach him would be most useful.
I even sent him a hardback copy of my book and never got any response.
So what are you working on now? Are you working on any books or anything, or are you working on the land?
Well, I kind of started a fictional account, which is a takeoff on the book that I wrote that is not fiction. Absolutely everything in it is true.
Right.
And I name names, and, there's a reason why it was banned in this country before it even had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like they asked Amazon.com about their conduct in that. I might even have a lawsuit.
Well, I think it was just a question of timing. Usually, I don't know, my understanding is that in the world of action, it's all timing. And so you're probably just premature with releasing it.
Well, I wrote the book for one reason, and that was to do what I could to keep Hillary Clinton from winning the presidency.
Right, for sure.
Because I reveal in that book things nobody's ever heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
Not through the media or not through anybody that hasn't been a part of it.
Yeah, well, for me, once that pizza stuff came out and all that, I've already, quite apart from all of this stuff, I've already had more than a lifetime of share of that kind of stuff, so I'm not really thrilled about, unless it's talking about how to solve it, I really don't have a lot of time for that conversation simply because nothing's being done anyway. There's still hundreds of thousands of children going missing every year. There's still missing and murdered Indigenous women. Cases never solved, Well,
when the Queen visited Canada a number of years ago, there were a number of Indigenous children she took back to England and never seen again.
Yeah, I think the number was 14 or 15, if I'm not mistaken.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
That kind of thing. Like you said, I think some people are also concluding the same thing, that basically what it comes down to is, do you want to protect the future generations or don't you? Do you want these crazy people to have control of your children? Do you want them to put ideas in their head? Do you want these people to dress your children? Do you want them to cut them up? What are you doing with your children?
Well, you hit it on the head, my dear. You hit it on the head.
And, for me, for some of us, when I talk about hundreds of thousands of people, I mean that literally. We are trying to not only restore, never mind this truth and reconciliation BS, okay? We're trying to restore, rejuvenate, revive our traditions, our ceremonies, and our culture. We don't need white guilt. We don't need help. We don't need nothing. We need people to get out of our way and to stop thwarting us by not giving us that bed money with welfare, by holding back the money for gloves or bus fare. The 1,001 cuts that lead to suicide or some other horrifying way of living.
Well, that's all within the means of the law. That's all within the means of the law, and that's what people forget. They don't realize that the solution is right in front of them. All it takes is vigilance to accomplish it. When a judge has a history of putting children in jails for a kickback from a private company, he needs to be hung.
Yeah, and I think these things like death penalty and whatnot, I'm afraid this is the time in history where if it was ever to be brought back, this would be the time. I hate to say that because I'm principally a Buddhist and a Taoist, and I don't believe in violence.
I agree completely. Enemies of children need to be removed from the planet.
Absolutely. They need to be isolated from children forever.
Well, let's start with Ginsburg, who tried to get them to turn the age of consent back to 12 years old.
Right. Let me just...
he should have been hung.
Could you please give the folks some information as to where to find your works before we continue?
Yes, I have a book out, Siege in the Davis Mountains, and if you want a free copy of it, an ebook copy of it, send me an email and with want book in the subject line, and I'll send you a free email or ebook copy. And can I give my email address?
Sure, that's up to you. But yeah, go ahead.
JCHORAK 7441 at sbcglobal.net. Thank you, April.
You're welcome. So you've got all these cats, and you've got this property, and you've got some not too bad weather.
I've got a huge backyard to accommodate them,
Mm-hmm.
and they love it. They don't wander out or anything. They're at my door all the time. And they'll eat anything I'll eat.
Mm-hmm. So do you have anything like events or anything like that on your property?
Any what?
Any events like celebrations or ceremonies or dances or get-togethers or...
No, I'm afraid I don't. Although I'm not an antisocial person,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I crave more company than I get. Vendiers,
Yeah.
And I've got a good friend that I talk with every day. That's Hans Schuni.
Yeah. I'd actually like to get to know him better.
Well, he's a card. He is a card. You'd enjoy him. You want to know about the mineral?
Yeah. Actually, it's been on my mind all day.
It is sold by this company, Rare Minerals Incorporated, which is in Las Vegas. But now they have reorganized, but before they reorganized, they knew that I was the one that discovered it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would send it to me and send it to people that I recommended. And to me, they'd send it free. But since they have all these contracts, Vietnam wants it all.
Right.
And then they have
Can't blame
vineyards
them,
in
though.
California. But it's only found in one place in the world, and that's on the Nevada desert. And I imagine this company has gone out of their way to claim all of it.
And are you still of the same view that parts of the Earth material is being removed from the planet and used elsewhere in the solar system and brought back?
Well, there's probably still some Earth material around the rings of Saturn.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
But if you get over the hump, then invariably there'll be discussions between people from off Earth and you. And I can make arrangements for more to be brought to Earth.
Right.
But you have to bear in mind this, you have to be prepared for it, because whatever's going to bring it is going to darken the skies across an entire continent, dumping it. Have you ever heard of the period of time of absolute darkness?
Recently?
No. It's a legend. It goes back to former extinctions, even.
I'm not sure.
But it seeped through. It's seeped through the cracks and has been put in religious texts and, as a prophecy.
Okay.
That was when it was dumped on Nevada.
Oh, okay.
An EMV is going to cover the Earth below it from the sun until it's through, and you're going to have absolute darkness until it leaves.
Right, yeah.
You won't see the stars, you won't see the sun, you won't see the moon, you won't see anything but it.
Yeah, I understand.
And it can be very scary if you're not prepared for it. I can ask, why don't I prove who I am by bringing an EMV close to Earth? Because I know what would happen. The monsters would use that as a false flag, hostile ET attack.
It's all spin. Yeah, so the thing for me is not fear. It's just like, for me, I'm the kind of person who will doubt till the last minute until I see it. I'll always be skeptical until I witness it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I just don't like cynics.
Yeah. See, whereas I'm totally open-minded at the same time.
I know. Obviously, because you're putting up with me.
Is there anything that you wanted to leave as a last thought, or any information that you want people to know until next time we meet?
I think a belief in God is a very important part to play in all of this, because you have to see that things are not out of order when they're right, that there is intelligent design, and if there's intelligent design, there's a designer. Now, I'm quoting from Crystal Clark.
Right. But at any rate, I wanted to say, Miigwech, thank you so much for being on, and I'm so glad that you were the first guest on the show.
My honor.
And we will be in touch soon. And I will say have a great morning, and have a great rest.
Thank you, April, and I hope you have a fruitful winter and Christmas.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
I hope you're enjoying the evening. I hope you enjoyed the interview with James Horak. Fascinating individual. He's got knowledge beyond one lifetime. How one acquires this is a bit of a mystery. But we can ask him. I'm for him coming back, definitely. Talk for hours. But I thought 3 hours was a long time, and it's late there in Texas, and he does have injuries. He is a vet. So time to get some rest too. And, yeah. Thank you, James.